Hello, welcome to Show the Thing. Oh, come on. Welcome to Show the Thing.
Show the Thing.
First up, we've got Nick, who's talking about probation in court.
So I think it's only us today.
Mal's going to
I've got a
Alright, so
thing.
we've got 15 minutes silent now. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to, alongside my colleagues James and Andy from the Probation Services team, talk about the recent discovery that we've conducted as a team into probation in court and what we could propose to do in Alpha. It's a timely opportunity to present an update because we passed discovery assessment yesterday. So with that in the bag, we feel
You passed it?
We passed it.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, so I'll give a bit of context. Then James is going to talk about the finance new research, and Andy's then going to lead into what we're going to look at in Alpha from a technical perspective and the kind of technical elements that we're going to explore further and what the opportunities are. So without further ado, why probation in court? So the problem that we intended to look at providing a solution for is that HMPPS currently struggles to provide high quality recommendations in a timely fashion in court. And that's really down to the number of efficiencies in the workflow in court currently. There's a lot of paper being bandied around, a lot of things being printed off, a lot of updates from various sources that are being required and asked for at the last minute that have a knock-on impact on being able to compile the right information to share with a magistrate or judge to come up with an appropriate recommendation in court.
And sorry, what kind of recommendations are you talking?
So these are recommendations for a sentence recommendation.
Okay, sentence.
Yeah. So we believe that a more usable joined-up service will save time in court, so stop people from doing numerous and onerous tasks that take them away from their core role. It'll improve data quality for HMPPS, so there'll be better information to make a judgment on, and that data will then be more easily consumable by people downstream who make use of it, such as offender managers in the community, people looking after offenders in custody, and if the offender comes back into court, there's a better paper trail of how they've behaved before. And we're also looking at providing court with better reports. They can do better performance measurement in terms of what it would look like. An assumption, we believe that we can save significant time and effort in court by automating aspects of case preparation. Currently, a lot of it is hand cranked. And this would enable speedier or more efficient downstream tasks such as setting up an OASIS or pre-sentence report. Currently, they have to wait for stuff upstream to take place, someone to record an event on the existing system, information to be looked at and acted upon. More speedy offender manager updates. So if someone's appearing in court tomorrow and they want a current order, you want an update from their current offender manager as quickly as possible, so you can then make a judgment about what you think their appropriate rehabilitation need might be, and also updates from police and other agencies. So if someone presents risks to the public, you want to know as quickly as possible from any other agency who's got information on that offender what risks they present and what you may need to do to progress that case in court. So I'm now going to pass over to James. James, who's going to talk about the user research highlights.
Hi, so I'm James Borer, I'm user research on the team. I actually talked to the studio. I did something similar to this in March when we were going really broad with the project, the discovery. So, yeah, we went really broad, as you should in discovery. And then in doing that, we spoke to 34 staff across 12 courts. So quite a lot, because we struggled to get into court to that point. It's not an easy, they're not easy places to access. They're very busy. And we did that across 9 locations because the geography, obviously, because National Probation Service is a relatively new thing in terms of being a national service. Previously, it was local. We wanted to see how different local working practices, how those local practices differed across the country. So we spoke to case administrators, so they're the people who prep cases for court. The probation officers obviously do the risk assessments and reporting in court, and then the senior court probation and admin staff who basically run the job, they kind of manage resources in the court. That's how the kind of breakdown of those 34 people we spoke to are, and most of us in the team went on at least 2 visits, which is great. It's very much a team sport, trying to trying to get that understanding of the court across the whole team rather than just coming through me, which would be good. So those are our main users. We didn't manage to speak to any defendants or offenders, which is remiss of us, but it's very difficult to get actually access to those people. So we're going to address that in an alpha. But we spoke to all the other main users in that list. I'm going to say a little bit about these user stories. I'm not going to go into any depth other than say we had more about the elevation. So we had 8 of these user stories or job stories, which define the high-level things that high-level tasks, and the associated need around those tasks that are being done in court. So this one is, I need to segment users as known, previously known, or current HMPPS, so I can prepare information for probation service officers. So in other words, have they been through us before, and are they currently on an order? Because that affects how we deal with them. So that's the kind of elevation that we were writing the exams, and we have quite a few. And that helped to kind of like, they were like the, if you like, the coat hangers from which we could then hang subtasks and things that were being done in more discrete, specific detail for the court. But I wanted to today just spend a little bit of time talking through how we went from being broad to being more narrowly focused. So that initial piece of work that we did identified 2 things where we thought our time would be better spent. One was in magistrates' courts rather than Crown. Magistrates are feeling the pinch in terms of speed of justice. That's where that's where that work is primarily kind of felt. That policy is primarily felt, and the administrative work. So it's the administrative work rather than the kind of clinical or the officers' work that we felt like there's more opportunity to provide value. Partly because it's relatively free of policy. There's still policy involved, but it's not as acutely kind of policy oriented. So as you'll know with assessments and stuff, it's like it's a big deal changing any of that stuff. Whereas admin work is easier. So we went narrow. We started to look more specifically at magistrates' courts and how they were administrating cases rather than assessing risk. And this is kind of like, albeit for pre-sentence reports, not all reports, pre-sentence reports, this is kind of how this journey looked. And I'm happy to share this journey with you at another time. Or want it?
I'm hoping you'd read each caption.
But just to give you a flavour of this, like this is what a list, a legal list of cases coming into court looks like. This is what case administrators see first. This is what they start to work with. This is what they start to make assessments on in terms of like, are they current, are they known, and what do we need to then know about them so the officer can do their job. It's messy, it's paper-based, it's slow because they have to go into Delius, check different records. Some of this stuff doesn't always match. There's different spelling differences, names aren't always matched. So it's a messy paper-based process. And then what they do is they tend to write, again on paper, a lot of that stuff down that they feel is relevant into different types of forms. So we've got prep forms, running forms, progress forms, all kind of doing the same job. So all kind of helping the officer prepare to write a case or prepare to advise court. Lots of duplication. You can imagine kind of some of this isn't even legible to court officers when they see it. Some of this is written twice. Some of this, probably down incorrectly. And then in terms of contacting offender managers, like Nick said, contacting agencies and NPS and CRC staff, a lot of this is done by email. So documents, so email templates are stored in local folders, along with other documents from court store and these other services, and then they're emailed off to places to get responses. It's time consuming, feels kind of slightly archaic, certainly to us who are familiar with kind of digital first services. Feels a bit odd, and we feel like this messiness is something we could help with. Another kind of pre-sentence report, lots of paper email. So from that, we thought that there's lots of pain points. There's 3 kind of main pain points. Offender manager updates, getting updates from people in the community in the field is hard, and the conversion isn't always very good. depending where you are. Some places better than others. Identifying information on previous convictions for current offenders, so like understanding, how they've performed on their order or how they've performed on previous probation orders. It's tough getting the offender manager in DLIS. It's, the usability in DLIS is poor, because it is. Getting that information is hard. And then matching people from Libra to DLIS is also time consuming, mainly because the volume of cases that are coming through, it just takes time and it's a frustration. So those were some of the 10 points. Our main hypothesis, as Nick's already said, is that we can help prepare cases for court, so that we can help officers advise court and reduce adjournments, and do that in a way that's the digital first service. I want to jump quickly to how we intend to move that forward, how we are starting to move that forward already. So we've got a prototype which has three prototypes where we are going to be testing our assumptions in the form of faculty. So like, we can reliably automate the matching of defendants, saving time and effort. Annie's going to talk a bit about some of that. Create a simpler, more usable way to solicit updates from offender managers. And then we can make allocating pre-sentence reports and saving information to do this easier to do. And we start to do some of that. So some of these prototypes we start to knock up and actually put in front of people as paid prototypes for now. So we're going out again tomorrow to a different court we haven't been to before. We've already done tested paper, sometimes like this really low fidelity stuff, just to test the initial concept. We've already tested some of these already, and we'll continue to iterate on these and get high fidelity and real data in, so we get more reliable responses from users. So there's three prototypes we're starting to use to test our assumptions. I'll go a quick clip if you want to hear it. This time? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. All right. I will share the link. Oh, right. Are you using your machine?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good question. So when the case administrator is searching for offender in DLIS, what are they starting with? Any identifiers?
Yeah, so name and date of birth. So first name, surname, date of birth is what they're primarily using.
Why do they have no other?
So the PNC number is in legal, it's not exposed, which is.
I'll explain it.
Yeah.
Because it's all about data, and that's the problem. So, as I said, this is what they've got. And in fact, if you see this list, I won't show it too much because it's live data, but you can see how they scribble all over it. They're putting all their notes on. They've got stuff that's current, it's not current, and high risk or whatever. So it's all about data. This isn't real data, by the way. This is fake data. So our first thing is, can we get the data from HMCTS? Because they've got all this wonderful data. We're all part of the same government. We're all part of the same thing, but we've never really been able to get that data through API. So hence the printing out. And as soon as you print out, they've got to copy it. They can't even cut and paste the copy. They've got to literally type it all in again. And what they're often doing is typing it in, writing it down on pieces of notes, writing it into Excel, taking it from Excel, then writing it back into DLIS. And by the time it gets into DLIS probation system with kind of mucked up letters and names, etc., etc. So one of the first things we did is said, can we get this data via API? And we rang up HMCTS, the courts, and one of the third-party CGI that do it, which was a really nice call, because the first thing they said, well, this is weird. We were going to ring you because we think we're going to develop these really nice APIs, but we think you, as the National Probation Service, might be interested in. So that's a bit spooky. So, well, that's brilliant. That's great. So, can we have an API? So, we've been in conversations with them, and we know from a government point of view that needs to be this kind of joined up. And there is an enthusiasm to do that. So, they've been starting to work in terms of working with them and getting that data to provide an API. And once we've got an API, we've got the data. So all of this stuff that's currently going in DLIS, your name, your address, the offences, all of this really nice information, we should then be able to automatically populate the list and start doing some interesting things. So the first thing really is to do with matching. So this isn't a real screen. Move my mouse over. This isn't a real screen. This is a hypothesis that we had, which was, can we match offenders in dealers? Because the problem is you've got names being slightly different. People coming to the police station with a name slightly different. We've got spelling mistakes. We've got all sorts of craziness like that. So currently what they're doing is they're putting the name, they're putting the first name, the surname, the date of birth in, trying to do a search. Sometimes it doesn't hit. Somebody's accidentally put the date of birth in wrong, etc. So can we do that better? Well, we've observed exactly what they do, and we kind of think we can do that better because we can do it automated. So one of the things that we've seen quite often is where the date of birth in the probation system is just wrong. The month or and the date is often mixed up, or the month is slightly wrong. So we can relatively easily do a search to say, well, we'll try all these different alternatives. We can even say, well, okay, we've got a direct hit with all the data. This is high confidence. Or we've got a direct hit in some of the data. This is a low confidence. But we think we can do that relatively easily. Something that takes some ages. So for instance, we've observed a situation where they will check to see if that person looks in DDS, and they say, no, there's not. Then they look at the case and say, actually, this is a serious case. This is a rape case. I need to delve in a bit deeper and try a bit more things. But we could be able to do that for every single case. And of course, we're using Elasticsearch, so that's relatively easy for us to do. This, by the way, was just to prove our hypothesis by actually taking one of these real lists, trying it against real data and say, yeah, we've got an algorithm, we think this works, and we can improve that based on real data. The next thing we started looking at, going back to Mike's question, which is about ID. So currently, there's no unique ID when someone comes in. But what is often is the P&C number, police national computer number, which is relatively unique in terms of we have it in the probation system, they have it in the court somewhere. So then we started looking at, well, that's embedded in what's called the CPS pack. And the CPS pack is exactly what you imagine. It's a prosecution case, all the witness statements, horrible photographs of people being beaten up and all that kind of stuff. But importantly inside there is information that we've got from the police, things like the P&C number. If we can grab that, that's great. So we did a spike around that. We found out actually we can, it's just a PDF, and although there's complications, some of the PDS has images in, so can we OCR that? Can we do optical character recognition? Did a spike around that? Actually, yes, we can. It's not slow, it's horrible, but we could do it. We could extract out the P&C number and do a better matching that way. So then we started looking at, well, if we want to get the CPS pack, this is held in a different system to Libra. It's held in a system called CourtStop. They hold their documents in CourtStop and their lists in Libra. So can we get an API to CourtStop? So we've asked for that. Now, again, it's important to know, when we first asked for that, they said no. They said, actually, no, you've got no rights to get this data. And we have to go back, look at the legal agreements that we've got with the CPS to say, well, actually, legally, we do have a right to that data. So we'll go back to you again and actually request that API, because they have had APIs in the past. The next thing we look at is technically some of the tasks are hard. I mean, it sounds pathetic, but the idea of taking a template, a Word template, and pasting that in Indeed is actually quite hard for them to do. It takes a bit of time. But actually, so one of the things they want to do is to notify the existing defender manager if someone's coming, we want to find out how they've been sentenced. So we think we can do that with just a one button click. Click a button and it will do it. Right now, they've got to log in, find the offender, go to the right of way, paste from here, start changing the text. So we did a spike around that. We think we can also do that as well, with some caveats. So there's all of these different elements, because we can get this data, that's up there somewhere, because we can get this data, or we think we can get this data, we think we can automate an awful lot of these things. And things that might be taking, say, 15 minutes, is the sort of stuff that really the computer can do in half a second, which then leaves more time to do other things. And I just really finish with just a couple of things, because this is just really, I think, the start of the journey, because we can also start thinking about things like getting data when someone gets sentenced. So actually this is hard. We can get the data with people sitting in court waiting for sentence to happen, literally sitting in there waiting for the sentence to happen. well, why don't we get HMC CTS by an API to tell us when, so we've requested that. We know there's that data. We know it's a bit of a pain to get the court order through. Why can't we get that data? Again, there's an API to do it. That's the kind of stuff that we can do. And in the future, it gets even more exciting because, again, HM and CTS are saying to us, well, actually, do you know what? We want to produce an API that allows you to observe an offender. So if you've got an offender on a current sentence, we will tell you when they go to court. You don't have to ask. We will tell you. These are really amazing things that we will be able to do in the future. And it's just the final thing, really, this thing about when you don't automate. We're in a court where probation officer just needed to find out if a child was at risk. That's all. That meant sitting on the phone, literally for 1 hour, trying to get through to whatever, Thames, whatever, child services, just sitting there, not being able to do any other work other than that. And all she needed to know was one thing: was this child on the register or not? Yes or no. Not even the details, just the binary yes and no. And by the way, after an hour, James came into the office and she had to get a chair for James, and she had to go out of the office for 3 seconds, and that's when they answered. And she had to start all over again. I'm not saying we can get an API for Chelsea, but just imagine an API that says that particular officer 1 hour is standing and waiting for a phone. Yeah.
Is that you? Questions?
Yeah, I'll take questions.
I've got a question. Have you spoken to the digital prison services team outside of this? Because that sounds like the beginning of really joining our data up right across the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, we haven't. So we've been getting our story straight.
Yeah.
Going for assessment. And this is the first opportunity we've had to share what we've learned. Also, opportunities. I think there's a lot of conversations we need to have with various people in the studio and outside the studio. Yeah. So the rest.
Okay. Can I specifically request you talk to Mike Willis and tell him what you're up to? Yeah, perhaps he does.
Yeah, very conversation.
It was interesting hearing about the start of the offender journey being involved. So we know that there are discussions at the moment about single offender models and unifying the 3 estates that we've got. Is this an opportunity to shove it further up into HMCTS?
It would be nice, but it's going to be hard, isn't it? Because once you're talking to the different departments, it gets bloody hard. Do you know what I mean? To rationalise that. And also, HMCTS are really just a proxy for the prosecution service and the police. So then you rely on the police. Yeah. So it starts getting harder and harder.
There's your statement, so that this would be an easy way of information to deal with some challenging.
Yeah. Or you're thinking about more, should it just be centralised across government? And wouldn't that be marvellous?
But we can take control of our bit.
Yeah.
Nothing else? Good. That's great. Mine can wait till next week. That's more than enough for everyone. Thank you. No, it's good one next week.
Okay.
That was,
Yeah.